We wanted to put on this event to celebrate our multicultural and multiracial community and to recognise that this didn't come about just by accident or just a natural process of progress. People have worked at anti-racism in this area for decades. But we're also here to commemorate one particular event, one famous day 40 years ago, when the Nazi National Front formed up in Duckett's Common, marched up to Turnpike Lane, turned left up the high road and were confronted pretty brutally by the community.
So we did indeed get together to organise a counter-demonstration. And this common, Duckett's Common, was completely full of people. And this was pre-internet days, so getting information out was much, much more difficult. So we did it with a hand duplicator, we did it with electric duplicators, we did leaflets in a big hurry, and we got them out as widely as we possibly could, and we made phone calls to people to come and support us. We had no idea what the response was going to be like. Haringey Council, then as now, represents one of Britain's most diverse boroughs and communities, and to its eternal credit, all councillors, I mean all, took the view that the far right were not welcome in this borough. Because I was advised by, let me put it gently, elders and betters from all over, don't get involved in challenging the National Front. They're irrelevant, they're not important, they'll go away. That's what we were told. My reply was, I don't think so. I think the message of division, hate, racism, the message of racial superiority, the message of discrimination is wrong, 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 wrong at any time in history. And again, to its credit, the Hornsey Journal, the local newspaper, and the NUJ chapel at the newspaper came out with an historic copy. Some of you may have seen reprints of it, which was a swastika saying 40 years on, the march of hate must be stopped. And it was again, that mobilised a lot of people. So hundreds, thousands of people came here to Duckett's Common, and we, in a peaceful way, said, they shall not pass, in exactly the same way that my parents' generation had stood at Cable Street in 1936 to say, they shall not pass. By standing here that day on this common to say they shall not pass, the tide turned against the rise of the far right, the intolerance and the racism that they were promoting all over London and indeed all over the country. And a few weeks later they tried the same trick in Lewisham, and it didn't work because hundreds of thousands of people became mobilised. The Anti-Nazi League grew out of it, and lots of other organisations grew out of it. And so a whole young generation of the 1970s, particularly black youngsters in the mid-1970s, fearful of what might happen to them, were suddenly emboldened because the whole community realised there is no future in racism, there is no future in division, there is no future in discrimination. The only way communities can achieve anything is by coming together and working together.
There were some who argued that we should meet separately and leave Nazis to march. And I want here today to pay tribute to Jeremy Corbyn and the great Bernie Grant, who said, no, we must confront the Nazis on the street. And the importance of Wood Green is that it was a dress rehearsal for the great Battle of Lewisham a few months later. Because what we established is that we were not going to allow the Nazis to establish a place in the mainstream of British politics. And the way to do that was to confront them wherever they met, whatever they did, and wherever they marched.
The National Front were not the only ones who didn't want us. There were other people, but they were hidden. So the lesson that we have to learn today is that apart from having the extreme right wing who openly say what they want, we still have many people in different political parties, in different institutions, whose aim is to stop us as black people, to stop women from progressing, to stop refugees from coming in, to stop, us getting proper wages, to try to smash our union so that we don't get no proper organization to defend our rights in the workplace. They're still around.
It's also important to remember just how racist this government is, because one of the reasons why fascist parties aren't doing very well, and even UKIP aren't doing that well at the moment, is because the Tories are stealing their racist clothes. Because exactly as Matt Rack said, they are blaming EU migrants, they are blaming refugees, they are blaming Muslims for their economic policies that are making the many worse off. So we must stand up to this, frankly, power-light racist government, because that is what they are. When Kenneth Clarke said Enoch Powell will be shocked at some of the things that are coming from the front bench, I think he was right, because let's not forget, Enoch Powell was sacked from the shadow front bench, but the racist policies coming out of Theresa May and the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd's speech, the Tory party conference, was written down as a hate speech by the police, and people were comparing her speech to sections of Mein Kampf. So I'm here to tell you, let's not forget exactly how racist this Tory government is.
On the question of refugees, last November, Lord Dubs came to see us at Fortismere School. He's an inspirational campaigner on the question of refugees, being as a Kindertransport survivor himself. I voted twice in favour of his amendment in the House of Commons. The Lords voted twice in favour of it, and yet on the last day of Parliament before the February break, the Tory Immigration Minister stood up and put down an order in the House of Commons reversing the Dubs amendment. That is a disgrace.
And as the Kurdish and Turkish community, we have experienced recently with the attack in Croydon against a young Kurdish guy, 17 years old, who was beaten up by a racist mob. He was beaten to a level where he almost lost his life. Yes, we blame those racist mobs. We do blame those people who beat that young person up. But more importantly, the real perpetrators of that attack was those people who were trying to divide us during the EU referendum. It was those people who were scapegoating migrant communities for the cuts that they have imposed on our NHS, on our schools, on our public services. So if there's anyone who should be made accountable for this, it's those people. It's Theresa May, it's Boris Johnson, it's Nigel Farage, it is all those racists that made this possible.
Islamophobia affects not just Muslims. In fact, if you're Asian looking, or you have a beard, or you're wearing a scarf, you will fit the bill of being a Muslim terrorist. That is not acceptable. It's offensive to us, and we totally fight against this kind of discrimination. People have been brainwashed into believing that Muslims are bad. They are terrorists. They want to take away your way of life. They want to bring in Sharia law. I personally find it offensive, because that is not what a Muslim who follows the Holy Quran truly believes in. We value life.
The politics of hate and the politics of fear are used to ensure those with the wealth maintain their wealth. The reason why they want to keep us divided is because they know it's the best way to ensure that we become wage slaves, that we won't fight back because we're too afraid to go and talk to our neighbour.
And today we face exactly the same type of attacks as has been mentioned on refugees, on migrants. And let's remember this, it's not migrant workers who have driven down wages in Britain. It is rip-off bosses who've attacked wages for working people in Britain. It is not people who've come here from around the world who've caused a housing crisis in London and across the country. It is decades of failure to build houses that has caused that crisis. And it is not migrant workers who are causing a crisis in our National Health Service. In fact, migrant workers prop up our health service. It is Tory cuts that is causing the crisis in our health service, in education, in local government and in services all across the country. And we don't forget who is really to blame, and we point the finger at those who are in power and those who caused this economic crisis, the billionaires and the bankers who plunged this world into economic chaos, and they ask us, ordinary people, to pay the price. And when things start to go wrong, they want to point the finger at minorities and people who speak a different language or have a different religion or come from another part of the world. And we reject that disunity, and we fight for unity and progress.
Because you only have to look across the channel today to see what happens if you allow Nazis a platform and the ability to campaign. We have the horrific possibility of an open Nazi like Le Pen, whose father said the Holocaust was a mere detail of history. We have that politician today who shamefully might well come first in the presidential election. Contrast Britain and France. In France, the Nazis are riding high. In Britain, the Nazis are in the gutter, they are out of the mainstream, and they are marginalised. That's down to you in Wood Green, us in Lewisham and Wood Green together.
I feel